very much for the Carol lecture, and I didn't have a chance to see the book The Architecture, but the title alone makes me smile and makes me think, wow, this must be a really, really, really interesting book. And of course, for me, there's a lot of connections to this title. Well, this is me 15 years ago, much younger, not wilder, and it's the AVL team of the Joep van Lieshout team, or the A team. And actually right from the beginning that I started making art, I was educated as a sculptor. I always used functional objects, design and architecture as my means of expression. And basically I will show you 3 larger projects, and which is called AVL-ville, the Free State that I built in Rotterdam in 2001, Slave City from 2007, and the new Tribal Labyrinth, which is current. But before that, just a little bit of history. This is a work from the 90s. It's called Bezel Drum, which is French for shaggin' wagon. And basically, it's a kind of a caravan that can slide out, and inside you'll find couches, mini bars, sound systems, beds, upholstered tables, and a little toilet here in the floor. And as you will see during the lecture, toilets are really a central red line in the work. Just as the exhibition of, which is now here, there's also a lot of toilets. Also an old work from the 90s, the Master and Slave Unit. And I always have been interested in architecture, but have never been interested in all the rules and laws around architecture. That you have to have a building permit, that you have to have a license, that you have to have a foundation, and all this kind of thing. So I always looked for ways to get around it. And the most simple way is to make a mobile home. Just put some wheels under it, and it's not a piece of architecture, but an object. And that was also how I looked at this piece. So what you see in the middle here is the master unit, which is basically an empty cube with 6, 7 identical holes in it. And in those holes you can click the slave units. And every slave unit has a very specific function, like a bedroom, kitchen, toilet, or office. This is also work from the 90s. It's called the Autocrat. That means the self-sufficient mobile. And it was made to survive in remote areas, in areas without access to modern luxuries. So you catch the water on the roof, and you can cook on wood. And on the outside here you'll find a slaughterhouse. Of course, you have to kill the animals for the food. And inside, basically, it's a big kitchen with a bed inside. But it was not only about making an object with this function. It was also trying to do it all the way. That meaning that all the hardware, all the hinges, the locks, the stove, the water taps, all the things that could be made by myself, I made by myself. I only bought the raw material, the plywood, the glass, and the fiberglass, and the steel. So it was a way to kind of avoid or to neglect existing design, existing products, and start all over again. Also still the 90s. This is called The Good, The Bad, and the Ugly. And this was a commission for a very known museum called the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. And they wanted to have a mobile arts lab. So they could do exhibitions and educational projects on schools and poor neighborhoods. So in a way it was a very good, how to say, action of this museum. But then I thought a little bit like, it's too much design, it's architecture, you know, they want to have something and I make something. This is not enough, this is just like doing it for the money, making something pretty for something nice. So I was about to say, I'm sorry, but of course I said yes, as very often. but I want to make something extra to it. and I wanted to build this black house. So the good, everything is inside this container, the bad and the ugly is all in the house. This was the end of the 90s, and at that moment they just found the Unabomber, the most looked for, so I say, the most wanted terrorist in America. And so they just discovered him, and I always had this kind of admiration for the Unabomber because he had like really interesting political ideas. So he was against globalization, too much technology, he was for recycling. And he lived in the woods in a small cabin, completely self-sufficient. He just took his bicycle once a month to the nearby village to buy sugar and to mail the bombs. And also the bombs, they were like all made out of recycled materials. So, and he worked with a small budget, not like, you know, a big, you know, budget, terrorist budget that they have now, but really, like, you know, like all of you could do something like this if you wanted to. So to me he was a kind of a hero. And in my imagination, I thought, well, this is the house of the Unabomber. So this is the inside of the trailer, with a place for the, I call it the teacher or the person who can do the workshops. They could do theater, music, exhibitions. And this is the house. Which basically looks a little bit like a hunting lodge or something like that. But if you look a little bit further, you'll find the hidden room in which you can imagine stuff being made. And here there is a machine to make environmentally unfriendly paint. And on the attic there was a kind of a place for experiments, which you can imagine kind of the Silence of the Lambs atmosphere. So it was really like, on one hand it accommodated all deviant and bad behavior. So all these works that I have been making in the 90s, basically almost when I put everything together I said, well, I have enough to start my own state, I have enough to make a village, so why don't we do one? And so in 2001 I went to the mayor of Rotterdam and I said, well, do you have a piece of land for us because we want to build like an open-air museum, open-air museum? Yeah. Open-air museum / free state, it would be very nice for people to see. And they said, yes, it's a good idea. So then we started our free state, and it was open to public, but that was basically the only thing which was, how to say, normal. For the rest, we didn't accept any rules or legislation, and the idea was that people living in Bezel Drum city could build their own houses without any technical or aesthetical or whatever rules. And so a lot of structures were being built. This was our flag. This was our illegal restaurant. And then we had workshops to make alcohol and drugs and weapons. We also had our money, which was introduced at the same time the euro money was introduced. And the euro money, it's, well, except for all the problems they have now, it's also a very ugly money. I mean, it doesn't have a nice design, it doesn't have nice color, even the size is not nice of the money. So that's why I decided we make money that looks better, has nicer colors, and have a little more heroic meaning. So that's why we designed this money by the Bank of AVL, and one AVL has the value of one beer. It's dedicated to weapons and bombs, the AVL to energy and alcohol, and the 25 to sex and mobile homes, and the 100 AVL to farming and nutrition. This is the workshop for weapons and bombs. This is all before 2001, when terrorism was still cool. So this is inside the container. You you can make weapons and bombs with, I say, daily use, free accessible chemicals and materials. This was the bedroom and this was the office of the freedom fighter to write the manifestos. We also generated our own energy and water purification systems. and we had a hospital and abortion clinic even. And the farm, which is called the Pioneer Set, which is basically one shipping container, and inside the shipping container, which basically was a whole farm consisting of stables and houses, which you could take apart and then transport in a shipping container, move it to any place, and then rebuild it to start a self-sufficient farm. So all the stuff that you see now fits inside the container, together with all the equipment. So at a certain moment I came to my studio and the whole street was full with cars, like police cars, fire trucks, people from the tax inspectors, environmental people, the animal protectionists, well basically anyone working for the government was there because they really didn't like to have a free state in the harbour of Rotterdam. And so basically they already closed it two times, and then they said, well, this is the third time, so now you close it yourself, or we come and we close it for you. So we weld everything shut and we send the bill to you. And then I was getting a little bit afraid and said, okay, we better stop. And so the Free State, the utopia, the anarchistic utopia, existed for 1 year. And actually, if you look in the history, that's not too bad. So many utopian societies existed for 1 year, 6 months, a year and a half. So it's the average of a utopian society. So after that, I started making a lot of things which were very much about order and freedom, about discipline and things like that. And I cannot show you all the work, so I just show you things that have to do more with architecture, like this giant womb, which was a sculpture in a series where I make sculptures for all the internal organs of the human being. And this was in my gallery, and at the opening there was this Belgian collector coming, huge guy, hands like this, and he was a retired gynecologist. And he said, wow, this is great. I have been looking at this thing my whole life, and now I have the opportunity to possess one. And I was thinking that's sold. They said, no, it's too small for me. I want to have it bigger so I can go inside with my wife, with my children, with my grandchildren. And to me this was like, what a fantastic idea, to have a beautiful object and just change it by adding some doors and windows and some functions into a house. So that's why I made the womb house. So basically it's a giant thing, and this is a picture. And so basically if you imagine to put 4 walls and a roof on the perimeter of the black base, you have a house, and all the functions of the house, like heating, cooling, kitchen, toilets, showers, everything is inside the womb. So basically, you make an empty shell, you put the womb inside, you plug it in, and you have a house. So basically, it's a kind of something that has to do with the ideals of Bauhaus, where they really wanted to produce, prefabricate the technical core with all this complicated stuff inside for cheap housing for the laborers. And of course, this kind of modernism had very many good and also bad examples. So that's why I thought, well, if you do a technical core, you make it into a beautiful, fantastic object. And then one of the ovaries was the toilet, and the other one was the minibar. So when there is a pussy, you also have it's called the bar rectum, the anus bar, which is basically the digestion system, human digestion system, starting with the tongue, saliva glands, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and it becomes bigger and bigger, and then how you call this thing? Well, the colon is so big that you can go inside. So this served as a bar, and we also make a version for a holiday house, and another one, a bigger one, for as a convention center. The wellness skull. So basically, those things I was looking for, kind of in sense of architecture. I didn't want to do something conceptual. I didn't want to do something fashionable. I just wanted to have an object, a shape, a sculpture, and then drill in some holes and make it into something functional. So inside is a sauna and a bubble bath. This was a day center for retired people. But I always, because those works, they're kind of friendly and nice, and everyone likes them. But still, I'm always looking for this kind of where the utopian and the dystopian merge. Well, during my time of AVLville, I was the most interested in the infrastructure, how to make the energy, how to clarify the water, how to get rid of the sewage. And there are many systems, and I was looking for advanced systems, new systems, environmentally friendly systems. So to me, the ideal was to make a biogas installation, because then you can recycle all the excrements into usable gas that you can use for cooking, heating, or generating electricity. So during this year of AVLville, I did all the research, designs, and calculations for this machine. At the end of the year, AVLville was closed, and there was no necessity anymore to make this complicated machine. And this machine was calculated for an optimum use. You need to have, let's say, 1,000 people living in the place in order to make the machine work properly. If you have too many, not good. If you don't have enough people, it doesn't work. So after this year, I decided to, although there was no use, to still make it. I said, I'm going to make this biogas installation, even if we don't have inhabitants, and even if we don't have 1,000 inhabitants. I'm just going to make it, and I will find 1,000 slaves in order to make my machine working. And the slaves would be lying in this kind of large bunk beds, connected to a system of hoses and tubes into their backsides and in their mouths. So basically, a couple of times a day, the excrements are sucked out with vacuum and transported into the biogas installation. But in order to make this system function, you need to feed them. So I make installations called a feeder, where you can make cheap food with the maximum yield of biogas. And in order to keep them happy and revolting, I also made the alcoholator, the big orange machine in the back that produces alcohol. Has 7 compartments of 2,000 liters, one from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the whole week. And also, together with the food, the alcohol was transported to the participants, the slaves. And then, at the end, the biogas was burned in the steam boiler, and the steam then was used to cook the food and to make the alcohol. So basically, you make a kind of a closed system functioning on excrement, food, and alcohol, which basically doesn't produce anything. The only thing that happens is that the human being is a small cogwheel in the machinery in this installation. Very much like in our society, where we all also like a small cogwheel in the immensely complicated society. So then, this machine, which was a functional machine, I also wanted to make something beautiful, something designed out of it. So I started making furniture based on the human body. So this is called the wall decoration, the revolve tables, which are basically kind of mutilated human bodies transformed in a functional object. And so as an artist, I'm also very much interested in the human body, because it's our own architecture, you could say. And this series was called the fossil chairs, which I basically used a human body, basically one of my interns that I put on the floor on hands and knees, and then cover them with a blanket, and then spray them with a kind of foam, fast-setting foam. And then you take off the shell, and then you have the ideal form, shape for the furniture. So the Technocrat, the machine, the biogas installation, was not producing anything, was just costing money. It was just, you know, you have to put in food and alcohol in order to make this machine work. And then I said, well, that's stupid. I mean, it's much better to make something that earns a lot of money. So why not make something which is really good and really environmentally friendly and with a lot of culture and has a yield of, let's say, 8 to 9 billion euros a year. So that's why I designed the Slave City, which is basically a concentration camp built for 200,000 people, which have to work, of course, in jobs that earn a lot of money. And the base for this installation was this giant Excel sheet, which I calculated everything, like how much food did they need, how much water, what's the amount of energy you need, and how you can use this energy, and biofuel, and how many cars do you need, what's the life cycle, life expectancy of all the people, how many computers, like everything was calculated. And to me, this Excel sheet was very important because the Excel sheet is a sign of our times. I mean, everyone has an Excel sheet on the computer, and a lot of decisions are made with respect to the Excel sheet. So, well, this is one penny cheaper, so we choose for this solution. And this kind of technocracy, this kind of making decisions without ethics, is very threatening and very interesting to me. And of course, to prepare this project, I studied a lot concentration camps and these kind of things. And then I discovered that many of the concentration camps, the German concentration camps, they were very rational. They were organized very rational, but also the reason why they existed in the first place was very rational, because they didn't have enough agricultural land to feed all the people, so they needed more land, and they needed to have people working there. They needed to have, let's say, the master farmers, which of course were the Germans, that had to live in the house of the Jews. So this was a kind of, there were secret calculations, but these calculations, they really existed. So this rationality, on one hand, makes us what we are, makes us developed people, makes us wealthy people, makes us cultural people, is at the same time a very dangerous, rationality can be very dangerous. So this is the urban plan of Slave City. So this is 100,000 women, 100,000 men, and this is the recreational area of the non-slaves. So basically here you have the call centers. It's the place where the slaves work, because the slaves, they are high-tech slaves, that IT slaves, you could say, that earn a lot of money. Then there were university, energy plants, brothels, workshops, farms, and things like that. They were all built around a sperm-shaped lake. And then here was museums, shopping centers, hotels, and things like that. So this project, I've been working, developing, designing, and calculating for, let's say, 3 years. And a lot of the work that I made at that time fitted in this Slave City. Like this welcoming center, which is basically selection and production unit. So it has a lot of silos where they have agricultural land and say remains of slaves, because only 6% were suitable and healthy for work, and the other people were unhealthy or unsuitable, and they would be processed in a different way. Inside this building, inside the welcome center, you have the selector, which is a kind of a funnel-shaped, high-tech funnel that basically decides what will happen to the slaves. So they, of course, they could work, or they could be recycled for consumption meat, compost, medical purposes. So the idea was to look at the human being as an object, and how far you can go into rationalize and to, how to say, to rule out any ethics and morals. So if you are suitable for work, there's only one way to get out of a call center if you are unsuitable for work. This is a call center, which basically has 25,000 inhabitants, and there were, let's say, 8 units altogether. And the slaves, they work all here in kind of shelving units, where one team is working, another team is sleeping, and the third team is working on the land or in the service industry. So I started making kind of, well, you could say, minimalistic sculptures or architectural models that has like shower units, toilets, and working and sleeping units. I never had the chance, or maybe basically also not the wish, to really make it function. Although it would have been a very interesting concept to really start finding volunteers or people, non-volunteers, to do it. Slave University. So yes, a slave university for the women and a university for the men. And basically all the, I say that, fields educated were of course very specifically for the use in slave city. There's also a place where one group was studying, the other group was sleeping, and the other group was working on the land in the service industry. This is the slaves for the university for the male slaves, which again has a kind of, because in my architecture, my objects, whatever you call it, there's always, very often there's a link to organism, to organs, or to human bodies. Even this object, which is in a way a very rational construction with 7 lecture halls that I cut open. On the same time, it looks very much like L'Origine du Monde, like the famous painting of Courbet, yes, thank you. So what also was very important in Slave City, that there were a lot of money being made, but there was also zero carbon dioxide, green energy, organic food, and agriculture. So basically it's a mixture of, again, kind of good, bad, and ugly. So this would be the daily schedule of the slaves, like 7 hours of work in the call center, agriculture, and 7 hours of sleep, and 3 hours of relaxation. There was no money to be earned in Slave City, because the whole goal for Slave City was to earn as much money as possible. And this money then could be used for many good things, like, say, culture, scientific research, or even you could, with this kind of money, you could really start an army, or to really change things in society. So since there was no money, the good slaves were rewarded with prostitution. So if you a good slave, you can visit brothels. If you are a very good slave, you can visit brothels more often. And if you are an excellent slave, you can go to one of the many luxury brothels. This is a standard brothel, which is again makes a kind of link with modernistic architecture. This kind of, let's say, the invention of industrialization of architecture, which was seen as an ideal in the 20s, and on the other hand led to anonymous architecture like the German Plattenbau, or kind of architecture that you also find in London post-war. This is the luxury bottle for man, which is in the shape of a womb. Here you can enter, and inside you will find bars and dancing floors and cabins, things like that. Very much like we see in the real world. The bottle for women was more advanced, and it's in the shape of a sperm cell. In reality, this would be 500 meters long, and the male slaves would enter in the tail, and then they come in this kind of compartments. And between every compartment, there's a small hole. And the goal is that they go to the front, so they have to fight their way to the front. That means only the strongest guys, they can go to the next one, or the most clever, or the meanest, or the one that is the smallest, they can go to the next place. Till they enter here in the neck, where they can recover, where they finally go to this place, where they have the final battle. And then there's only one winner, and this winner is available for sex with the women. So the women only want to have the best. And so this piece is not only about bottles or architecture or about slaves, but it's also about our world, in which like survival of the fittest is a very important part. And survival of the fittest made us like clever people like you, instead of cavemen. On the other hand, Darwinism, survival of the strongest, the fittest, is also something very much exploited by totalitarian regimes. And there is a fine line between nature and this kind of undesired systems. This is the headquarters of Slave City, so where all the managers work. Basically, it's also a womb and a penis in position of reproduction. And inside, the different parts, the ovary, the bladder, the testicles, are different parts of the management of Slave City, in which I made this combination of different departments that, well, maybe don't fit together, but also fit very nice together. Like selection and bookkeeping, slave affairs and prostitution, and agriculture, healthcare, recycling, purification. The same with the health center, the hospital. Like in Slave City, they had, of course, they had a lot of money. They could build the best architecture, the largest architecture, the most advanced architecture. So in all the different cylinders are different departments and buildings. And also, with, of course, with this medical care, a lot of money could be earned, because there was about 2.7 organs to be transplanted for every recycled slave. So there was a lot of people that could be helped in the hospitals. Then, of course, there were different typology of housing for the managers. And this is the museum of Slave City. It's called the Museo Jester, which is a congestion of words together of museum and digestion. And it's a huge digestion system in which every part and every bowl there is a different department for sculpture, architecture, old masters, coins, antiquities, and things like that. So this would be like the largest museum in the world. Here you can see the entrance. This is the turbine hall, by the way. Here, the last part of the intestine. And they would be all connected with escalators and corridors and tunnels. This is a cutaway drawing where you see the turbine hall, the painting, the sculpture, but there were also many different parts in it, like bookshops, shopping centers, bars, hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, brothels. So basically this was a world by itself. And the idea was a little bit like once you are entering this world of art, this world of culture, like I did, it's very difficult to get out. It's a kind of, I don't know if you haven't been in a casino in Las Vegas, at the moment you enter the casino and you look behind, you don't know where you came from. So this is the idea also about the Museum of Gesture. So once you go in, you come in a kind of a labyrinth and you will be unable to leave this world of culture. And the world of culture is considered as something nice, but on the other hand, it's a kind of a trap. It's a kind of a place where that exists because people keep on maintaining it. This is the hotel. This is the shopping mall. You cannot really see, but there's also the largest structure. And in a way, it also, of course, mimics a little bit this kind of fantastic architecture of the Emirates, where they build these islands and the biggest of this and the biggest of that. And basically, it's also what you see in architecture nowadays, with the help of computers and high technology building. They can do amazing buildings. But on the other hand, those buildings are also kind of empty. So that's why I also start using this language, this kind of, let's say, ideas to make this kind of fantastic architecture. So basically here you have all the different shops, like everything. High luxury and cheap shops. And this is the model of the shopping mall, the Mall of Babel it was called, after it had been falling apart. And this was in 2000, made in 2006 or 2007, a little bit before our economy started crumbling. Because I thought that you cannot keep on consuming like the way how we do. There is a certain end. There's a concrete block on the road. So it was Slave City, and so I was thinking. I was getting interested in kind of revolution. Making a new world, making a new order, making monuments for heroism, for sacrifice. So that's why I make a series of 3 monuments. This is called World War I, which was inspired by cannon of the First World War, German cannon, WW2, Russian cannon, and WW3, American contemporary cannon. And I made them because I like to make monuments, and I also didn't like the way how violence, war, sacrifice became, clean-washed, became kind of censored. Like violence was not decent anymore, especially in cases of war. And that's what you saw also in the war that we have at this moment. Very few Western soldiers die, and if they die, it's an accident only. And so it's a completely, Disneyfied violence. This is mother and child, and this is the monument. It's basically is a monument for a future revolution, or a nondescript revolution. We don't know if it's happened, when it will happen, and who are the actors in the revolution. We just see some old man trying to escape, followed animals. So, now the good news. That is the new tribal labyrinth. It's a project I started working on 2 years ago. And it's also, I wanted to create a utopian world, a new world in which production and agriculture is very important again. So what we see now, basically, all the industry is going to those countries where it's the cheapest to produce. Agriculture is done in anonymous, high efficiency buildings, or even is flown from Africa or the other world, the other side of the world. So I wanted to break that. So, because I don't think it's normal that all the production and manual labor is done somewhere else, and here we are a world of service industry, lawyers, salesmen, designers, architects, artists, transporters, and so on. So to me, a real world should have all those things together. So it's a kind of romanticism towards industry and agriculture. So that's why I make a reinvention of the Industrial Revolution. So I start making these big machines and installation necessary for industrial production. And I also started making a kind of many different farms from different times, from prehistory to Middle Ages to 17th century, the present, and the future, the far future. And then I would like, that's why it's called the labyrinth, would like to put all those structures, machines, and factories together to create a new utopian world. So in a way, it's a kind of a prolongation of the arts and crafts movement, where they try to protect the arts and the crafts from the industry, but now even the industry itself has to be protected. What you see now is called the Huisjescoop, which is a farm from the year zero, literally. So we say the farm of Joseph. So this is the sleeping room, the kitchen, the Dadaistic postmodern carpenter's workshop. There's another farm, it's a subterranean farm, so it can be covered with soil and be hidden or insulated from the elements. And then these things are chimneys and light shafts. This is called the insect experimental. So I was researching ways to grow insects for consumption, and as you maybe know, it takes a lot of energy, water, and land to make meat. And insects, they also have high level proteins, but they take like 10% of the amount of energy, water, and space that a chicken, cow, or pig would take. So I tried to make this construction in order to genetically manipulate and train insects to reproduce, feed, and transport themselves to the place where they could be harvested by the farmer. And this is then the insect farm, the real insect farm, a real production unit where there can be produced insects in high quantities. So in all these drawers are insects, and in the silos there is feed, water, and equipment. And still, I always have to remember Donald Judd when I see it. So it's so in my work I always make this kind of links to art, and design, and architecture at different times. And this is one of the farms of the future, which is basically cut away reactor, where food can be produced in a completely artificial way with bacteria and enzymes. So a kind of production of food without any animal or plant. So this is some of the machines. This is the sawmill, which basically is this is the sawmill, and here is a little car where you put the tree trunk and then you can cut slices of it, like timber, like planks or beams, in order to build houses or to make furniture. And this whole machine is propelled with this treadmill in the back. So basically here we have 12 people pushing the treadmill and then propelling this axle here, and that propels the sawmill. So basically what I said is like, you know, to make this kind of industry which is without fossil fuel, without electricity, with just with manual power. So it's a kind of utopia, and again, it's a kind of there's a strange dystopian side, because it's very hard work to make this machine work. On the other hand, you can say, well, maybe it's not work, it's force, or it's just a way to express your idealism that you have to produce the raw materials. And inside this sawmill, where it's also the living quarters of the people working there, you'll find nice furniture that relates to maybe like a Wiener Werkstatt or arts and crafts or modernism. And there's also mirrors and art on the wall. There's also cooking equipment here, which is basically made in the same way as the rest of the machine. So it has chains and rectangular tubes, and there's always something cooking. So in a way, what I try to express in this machine is that the people, the tribe, working in this factory, they make a group, they come together, they cook together, they live together, and they have this kind of idealism. So to bring back idealism into production, to bring back idealism into machines. And basically you could say it's a kind of a romanticism, like trying, like in the 70s people wanted to go back to the nature, and now people want to go back to the factories, to a kind of heroism of production. This is the same sawmill that you saw, that I just showed you, but this one is extended with a milk machine and a cheese maker. So basically with the same axle that's propelled with the treadmill, the milking machine and the cheese maker are propelled. So basically, at the moment you start cutting wood, you also have to milk the cows and make the cheese. Which is a very strange combination. Because you don't need wood and milk at the same time. So this kind of idealism that I just illustrated with this kind of idealistic living with modernism and nice surrounding is a kind of raped by the fact that people only have to eat cheese all the time. This is the naphtha cracker, which is a machine very important in the chemical industry. It's like the core of the chemical industry, where oil or coal or wood is distilled, and then the different fractions of the different fluids you get from this gas condensed is then being cracked in the naphtha cracker, which basically means that you use the oil and you make it in very small molecules that you can reorder. And when you reorder them, you can make, for example, plastics out of it, medicine. So basically, all the chemical industry originates in this machine, which of course is an extremely complicated machine in reality. And this is a kind of improvised version of it, made with the materials and tools which were available. And but also was a very dangerous machine, because you have to imagine, well, this is like a distillery, also operating with fire, so you're distilling oil. Then you have in this funnels, you have to pour a bucket of naphtha, which is kind of gasoline, and a bucket of water. They have to open the valves, and then the stuff goes into this kind of system which has 1000 degrees centigrade temperature and pressure of 200 atmospheres. Basically, it's very, very, very dangerous and very, very explosive. Basically, you could say by operating this machine, you almost surely will die. And the product of this machine, if you are lucky, could be something like, you know, a disposable bottle. So the idea was that, you know, to really give new value on material, to say, well, this piece of shit plastic, like 2 people died in order to produce this bottle. So we have to really think, if we produce something, really think what we buy, and really think what we do with it, and what kind of things we do. And also a kind of heroism for labor. This is another machine. It's called the Mondiam. It's a forging hammer. And this is the animalist constructivist. And this is a iron melting oven. So basically, in the top you put cokes and iron, and then you force air through the system, and then the iron starts melting, and then the molten iron you can use to cast machine parts or casseroles, I say pans, and other functional objects. And basically this part in the middle is the machine. And the machine could be made very simple, but I wanted to combine 2 worlds in this machine. I wanted to make this kind of tribal object in the middle, like it looks like an object for fertility or for like a tribal object, and then it longs for primitivism, it longs for tribalism, it longs for animalistic behavior, religion and rituals, and then combined with the kind of constructivist structure that holds up the structure. And this constructivist time refers to that, you know, once you have more machines, life will be better. So this belief in technology and the belief in the future. So basically these were the 2 big utopias before the Second World War, the expressionist and the constructivist. And to me, I wanted to bring those 2 utopias in this object. This is a loom, which is called the bachelor machine, which is when you sit here, your feet and your hands are all connected to the machine in order to operate this machine, and you become, in fact, one with the machine. So it's like machine and human are being reunited. This is an object. This is in my studio, which I'm making at this moment, which is called the Weaver. Basically, it's also a loom, and then all the threads of the loom, they come together and they become a kind of human figure. So in this, you cannot see what really happens. Is this man pulling the loom, or is the man being eaten by the loom? And so it's very much about the connection between the human and the textile industry. The textile industry is a strange industry. It's different than, for example, blast furnaces, because it's an industry that's very volatile. It means like it's very simple to take away your loom and put it in another country where it's cheaper, and then move it again where it's cheaper and cheaper. So the battle for the lowest price is extreme in the textile industry, and also the amount of exploitation is extreme. But the thing that makes all this kind of things happening is people like you and me. Like, you know, a lot of people, they just want to have the cheapest jeans or the cheapest this. And that means we all are guilty for this kind of systems to happen. And with other industries, like steel industry, you don't have this because you have like a kind of international price for steel. They're much better organized. You cannot just change, you cannot move a blast furnace, unfortunately. This is a blast furnace, which is in Marseille at this moment. And so this thing in the back is the actual blast furnace. This are purification systems to recycle the waste gases, and then the waste gases are burned here in these cylinders that then can be used to preheat the air that's being blasted into the furnace, and in order to make the furnace being hotter and more efficient. And with this machine that I actually made like a kind of a sculpture, I wanted to make it inhabited. So you'll find like bedrooms, you'll find kitchens here, you'll find living quarters, you'll find little corners where you can barbecue, where you can sleep, where you can play cards. And basically, I wanted that the people, the laborers, and the machine, they live in harmony. That they really want to live there. That they, because here this is an inferno. The blast furnace is really working. It's very, very, very hot, very, very loud, very, very dusty, very, very dirty. But still, it's a kind of a romanticism to an idealism towards the industry. And around this blast furnace, I placed this kind of modernist furniture, but also this sculpture that I did a couple of years ago, which is called The Exploded View, and basically are all the human organs, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, that are connected with the veins and bowels, etc., etc. And of course there is a direct link between the human organism and the machine, because it also has this kind of volumes and connections. And then this sculpture, which is the Horn of Plenty. Basically, it's a very big woman with a big family with 3 children. And then this sculpture, which is called the Tomb, which basically represents death. So in this work, it's like the human cycle and the machine and the industry are combined. And then the highest point of the blast furnace is the toilet. So this is the last works, the works that I'm working at this moment, which I call the machine hall, where I'm making big monuments for machines. So and these are machines, very, very big, very, very heavy. And with these machines, you can make other machines. This, for example, is a giant lathe, drills, forging hammers, steam hammers. And this is the last piece that I will start working on next week, which is called the steam hammer. And actually it's called the steam hammer house. So this is a huge, huge hammer. So this block here that goes up and down weighs about 10,000 kilograms, and it's used to forge like very, very heavy metal industrial parts. And inside this machine I will make living quarters. So here is a toilet, this will be a bathtub, this will be a shower, there will be kitchens. So basically like the womb house, where you start living in the womb, I will make this giant steam hammer that basically is a house in which to live. And well, this is the next time you'll see this one finished. For now, it's the end of the lesson. became very silent in the middle. Maybe I should make a little bit more lighter on this. So I say it's not that bad. Good guy.